I think that's it. I don't see me returning to the United States. Not now, not in a few years, not after the news this week. And in today's video, I'm going to share some news this week that's really made me recognize, like, man, I don't know if the US is for me unless some things really, really change in the near future. But more importantly, for all of you, I want to share what I view to be 3 things about the Dominican Republic that might be what we consider to be unsafe, and how you can mitigate that, how you can overcome those safety concerns. So this week, of course, I'm talking about the school shooting in Atlanta, or outside of Atlanta, Georgia, where from what I last read, I think there's 4 people dead, 2 students, 2 teachers, and a whole bunch more injured. And maybe go down the rabbit hole and search a few things. And then also it really hit home for me with something that happened this past weekend in Michigan when I was there in Michigan around safety to formulate this thought that, this might be the spot for us for the long haul, let alone the next few years, which is what we intended, meaning in the Dominican Republic. So I Googled and searched about school shootings, and I learned in 2023 from U.S. News and World Report, and I didn't know this, but there were 350 school shootings in the United States in 2023. 350. That's almost 1 a day for the year. And even more than that, there's about 170 school days a year. That's like 2 for every school day. So every day that a parent sends their kid to school in the United States, twice that day, there will be a shooting. That's the rate of school shootings in 2023. And from what I see in 2024, that's kind of the path that it's on right now as well. Maybe the stats are wrong, but I read a few different articles, ChatGPT'd it, and those are the numbers that I learned of school shootings on buses in schools and so on throughout the United States in 2023, and then so far in 2024, which is just crazy. But bringing it closer to home for me, we were in Michigan for the month of August. For those of you that follow this channel, you know that we took a break, went back to the States for a month, to our home there, and then came back here for the start of school just recently, just a few days ago as I record this. And man, one of the things that happened there that didn't get, I don't think, as broad a coverage on Saturday, last Saturday, this is Labor Day weekend, 2024, at the Michigan State Fair, Saturday evening, a day that my family and I said, you know what we should do today? We should go to the Michigan State Fair. There was a shooting. Now, it wasn't a mass active shooter type of shooting. A bunch of kids got into a fight in a parking lot, and somebody opened fire, killing a 14-year-old boy and injuring another 14-year-old boy that I think is in stable condition. But that happened in a town called Novi, Michigan. To give you an idea of Novi, Michigan from a status perspective, average home price there is about $470,000. Average home price in the state of Michigan is about $200,000. So this is a affluent, prosperous, well-to-do area where this kind of crime happened. Now, okay, that's random. But in the last 2 years, right around where I live in Michigan, where my home is in Michigan, we've had in 2022, I believe it was, the Oxford school shooting where a boy went into school and killed, I think, 4 people. He's been convicted. Both his parents have been convicted. That was kind of landmark. That never happened before. And then on top of that, in 2023, there was the Michigan State shooting. So Oxford is to the east of me. Michigan State is to the west of me, about 45 minutes each direction. And then more recently, there was a shooting in a town called Rochester Hills in early 2024 at a splash pad, like where kids play in like a water park type of thing. And I think 8 people were injured. I can't remember if there was a death on that one, but it doesn't matter. But that all happened around me. And then I searched my city's school district in Michigan, which is a great town, beautiful. There's no homeless. It's like, from other cities I visited in the United States, my town still stands out as like, wow, really a wholesome Hallmark movie type of town. And there was a hoax last year, a hoax. Somebody called in a school shooting. Actually, they showed a picture of it. They wrote it in red marker on a white piece of paper. There will be a shooting at the high school at this time on this day. And thankfully, that was just a hoax. However, flashing back to the Atlanta shooting, if you read the article, the student, the kid that that was the perpetrator in this instance, a year prior, the FBI visited his house over threats of a school shooting, a hoax a year ago. So that scares me to think about what's a hoax today in my town, like, oh, but it didn't happen, but it could. And Atlanta's proof of that. Adding on to that is this. I was talking to a friend about the Dominican versus the United States in terms of safety and brought this issue up, as I always do. There's no random violence. You don't have school shootings and mass shootings. Like, I don't worry about that sending my kids to school. And he was like, yeah, but it's one of those things you just prepare for. And I'm like, whoa, in my brain. I mean, and again, I get it, like you're living it. And there's things that I normalize here that I'll talk about here in a moment, safety-wise in the Dominican Republic. But for him, it was just like he had to rationalize and say like, yeah, hey, shit happens. The idea that shit happens to the level that we're desensitized around 350 school. Did you know that there were 350 school shootings? I didn't know that. Google it, search it. Maybe I'm wrong, but there were 350 school shootings in 2023. The fact that we've just sort of like accepted it as what happens in a country to our kids at a place that they should be able to go and be safe at school, it just blows my mind. And even the idea that kids need to prepare with an active shooter drill. I mean, I'm making a bit of a joke of it, but it's really not that crazy to say, not these shootings, but like the active shooter drill. I'll say this, it may sound like I'm making a joke and I'm not, but hey kids, let's pretend a man or woman or whatever just broke into the school and wants to shoot you with a gun. What do? Let's practice. That's crazy, but normal in the United States. The U.S. has its positives and negatives. The Dominican Republic has its positive and negatives. So I'm not going to sit here and say that is bad and all the good happens in DR. Many of you know the issues here. There's poverty, there's corruption, there's all these things. It exists in the U.S. Boy, I think corruption doesn't get enough play, to be honest with you there. I think DR and other Latin American countries get like blamed for corruption more because maybe it's more overt and obvious and in your face, but come on. Anyway. There's corruption, there's poverty, there's inequality, there's all the things in the Dominican Republic. I did a post recently and people said, you're saying the Dominican's not racist or there's no racism? I'm like, no, I never said that. I just said that Amnesty International saying we want you to change because you're racist is the worst way to get somebody to change. Like nobody wants to be told they're racist and then say, oh, am I? I'll change. They're going to get defensive. Nothing happens. But anyway, there's racism that exists here and in every country for that matter. So nothing is perfect. No place is perfect. But my standards, my family's values, I think end at the idea that shooting up a school is just something we have to accept. And maybe bringing it home for me and looking like to the right, Michigan State, to the left, Oxford, to the left again, Rochester Hills and that splash pad. In my own backyard, a hoax. I don't know. I just don't know if I want to deal with that. We've talked about like, well, high school might be when we bring our kids back to the States. Look, I'm never going to say one way or the other, but right now, if you were to ask me and say, you got to choose, I don't see us going back. I don't see us going back. So that's my take on the news of this week and why I just, I'm hesitant. I'm hesitant now more than I was 2-3 days ago with this new news and then thinking about it and dissecting it and looking at some of these stats and reflecting on that conversation with my friend. All of that is adding up to like, what are you doing, man? Why would you go back? Why would you go back? Let's talk about the Dominican Republic. So is the Dominican Republic paradise? Well, yes, it is. I mean, come on, look at this. This place is incredibly cool. It's incredibly awesome. For many people, they say, well, not for everybody. And I get that. I can't make content for everybody. I make content for you who's watching, who speaks English, probably Dominican diaspora in Canada, US, Europe, or whatever, who's got some means and who wants to come here and live a good life, live a prosperous life. Not the richest, not the poorest, maybe the richest, but certainly not the poorest, but a good life. So you're not going to be living in barrios and different places where you're going to face some of the issues that I talk about right now. But it exists, but it's still paradise. It just is. This country's amazing. I've fallen in love with it. I fell in love with my wife, maybe because she's Dominican. Who knows? Maybe I don't even like her that much, but I like the country she's from. That's possible. No, actually, I love my wife. That was a weird rant, but go with me. I'm doing this live, so it is what it is. Or not live, but no edits. So here's 3 things. 3 danger spots in the Dominican Republic. So if I'm looking at safety in the U.S. and it's gone too far in terms of mass and school shootings, what is safety here? And there's 3. There's 3 areas that I could think of that are unsafe, and then I want to share how we mitigate that, how we ensure we don't fall victim to these. And I have it written down. I might have to go up and read the 3rd one because I can only remember 1 right now. Maybe in flow, or 2 right now. Maybe in flow, I'll remember the 3rd. So the first one is driving. Traffic and driving. It's not good here. It's not. When I was in the U.S., it was way easier to drive around. So let's be clear. Driving here is dangerous. The stats prove it. Most of the driving stats that show the fatality rates have to do with motorcycles, have to do with the little bikes and even pedestrians on the roadway. That news this past week of the 40 people that were mowed down, they say at a bar. Boy, that news bothered me. I'm going to do an aside. The news comes out, and of course the U.S. picks it up because U.S. media and us as Americans are biased to the idea that if a bus or truck drove through 40 people, quote unquote, in a bar, it must be a terrorist attack. But they don't understand what the Dominican Republic is. That incident, as I look at it now, I reported on it very early on, was bar goers out in the middle of the road. Bad move. The road was a blind curve. It was hard to see. It's 2, 3 in the morning. The dude's driving a truck full of avocados. Hard to stop. I know he fled, but boy, you got to be scared to death after just blowing through that. So we'll see what the evidence comes with and all of that. And some people may know more about that than others. But the whole point I'm saying is driving here and the atmosphere around driving and the fatalities and pedestrian hits and all of that, it's dangerous. Here's a couple things that we do to mitigate that. First, we at all costs, at most cost, avoid driving at night. Doesn't mean we never drive at night. It happens, gets a little later than we thought coming home, but it is what it is. And if it's Punta Cana specifically, going from like Cortecito to Punta Cana Village, for instance, from north to south, it's a very different driving at night than if you're on the highway in Santo Domingo, in Santiago, in La Romana, in Higüey, on the North Shore, driving toward Cabarete. That's a different drive at night. Like, I don't want to drive at night up there. I don't mind driving at night in Punta Cana. Punta Cana has enough of a developed nature where you're not going to face as much of the stuff, the pedestrians and the cars with lights out and the bikes, as you will in other parts of the country. But even still, we try to avoid driving at night in Punta Cana, anywhere in the Dominican Republic. That's one way around it. The second thing is, man, look, just yield the right of way to anything bigger than you. That's what we do. When I see a bus or a truck and they're driving a little nutty, I back off. Even vans, these like tourist vans, where they're like weaving in and out, I back off. I drive so defensively around them. I let them go. I try not to pass them if I don't need to. Like, if they're behind me, I change lanes just to get out of, like, I don't want to be rear-ended by them. Avoid trucks and buses, and you'll be fine in traffic. I think DR driving gets a bad rap because of the stats, and yeah, it is a little nutty with these bikes and everything. But if you don't drive at night and you avoid the buses and trucks, you'll be fine. The pedestrians, the bikes, you just got to keep your eyes open. It is what it is. That's driving in DR. You get used to it. So that's one. Driving in DR is one of the more dangerous things, one of the least safe things I think there is. Still, to me, it's controllable. I can do things to defend myself against it. It's not somebody breaking into my kid's school or the place I am or at a festival that I'm at and shooting it up. So I'll take it. The second thing is like heavy crime, domestic crime. Here's the thing. Somebody that, most of the crime that happens here is domestic. It's two guys that don't like each other hitting each other with machetes. It's in the home. There's a lot of violence against women for sure. Most of that, not all of it, most of that happens in your lower income, impoverished neighborhoods where there's less education and less socioeconomic success. That's not, that's just an observation factually. My point in saying it to all of you is I get a lot of pushback like, oh, go visit this barrio or go see this place. I'm like, why? Why would I go to the most dangerous neighborhoods? That makes no sense. And for you watching me, my channel is about living and moving and being in the Dominican Republic, investing in the Dominican Republic. You have the means not to be in those environments. So I don't see that as big a risk. Now, that doesn't mean that people that are well off don't commit domestic violence. It happens for sure, but to a way less degree. So I look at this issue, this safety measure of domestic violence as being controllable if you're moving to a place where likely you're not going to be surrounded by that. And more than likely, if you're watching this, you're bilingual already, you're on an educational spectrum higher than the areas that see the highest rates of domestic violence. So that's number two. The third thing is like more the petty crime. So this is like being mugged, like mugged might be hard, like being robbed. Somebody takes something from you at night for gunpoint at an ATM, pickpocketing. Some of that's petty, some of that's more violent. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying like, oh, somebody holds a gun to your head, even though they don't use it, that's petty, but you get my point. It's crime that is not, doesn't involve bodily harm. It just more scares you or pisses you off. I'll tell you what, having an editor edit out these little moments makes it way easier not to step on yourself, but we're rolling with it. Here's what I would say to avoid that. move to areas that have a higher socioeconomic standing. Don't be afraid to spend a little bit of money to live here. A lot of people say, oh my God, it's so much cheaper in DR, and it can be. And I'm going to release a video of somebody I reviewed that does a great job of breaking down her budget up on the North Shore. But even in that, I want to talk to a couple of things where I think people should be mindful of, like when you hear her budget, remember this kind of thing. But the point is, you can live for less here, no doubt. Las Terrenas, Cabarete, Punta Cana, Piantini, a lot of Santiago. Target those areas to move. You're going to face less, not none, but less of like somebody grabbing your phone out of your hand, or somebody picking your pocket, or somebody holding you up in an ATM. These are areas and neighborhoods where, yeah, it's going to cost you more maybe than if you move to some smaller Campo type town. And if you want to live in the Campo, go for it. But my point is, if you live in areas that have developed, and there are more than just Punta Cana in this country, and spend a little bit more money or budget a little bit more in order to do so, live in a gated community or a gated apartment building. Be in areas, be near areas where there's other maybe expats or people that are Dominican that make a little bit more money and don't have the need to break into your home or whatever. Or even better than that, in those areas, right, wrong, or otherwise, is where security and police patrol. They're the safest spots. So find the spots that you might spend a little bit more than you want to on, budget a little bit more, but that are going to give you that sense of safety from the petty or lower end non-bodily harm crime, or even just being robbed. Doesn't mean it won't. Everybody can be. Crime can happen anywhere, but that's how we protect against those types of crimes. We live in a neighborhood that's on the higher end of the socioeconomic ladder. It's gated. We choose to live in Punta Cana, which is overall more developed. We don't drive at night whenever we can avoid it. There's a lot of things we do in that regard. So that's my take. That is what I would share as far as why I don't know that we'll ever return to the United States full time. We'll visit, of course, but not full time. I don't think. Time may change it. Maybe policies change. Maybe this mental health epidemic in the States changes and the rate of these go down, but we shall see. The other thing that I want to share with you is, if you are saying, you know what, Jamie, you're right, I got to get more serious and I want to make that move down to DR, I want to tell you the tactics of how you can make the move. And I did that right here in this video. So just pop this video up, watch that, and it'll teach you everything you need to know.